today we will discuss the concept of exception handling and the try, catch, and finally blocks as we use it in Java programming. Okay, first we must understand the difference between the checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. There are two types of exceptions that we can encounter. One are checked exceptions, the others are unchecked exceptions. First, let me discuss the unchecked exception. Take a look at the following code. I'm using the Python tutor website to show you this. As I mentioned before, Python tutor website lets you write code in Java, C++, and other programming languages, and you can see it being executed. So here I have a simple class. I'm calling it test, and I'm using the public static void main, a simple void main method. In here I have an integer x and an integer y, which I have initialized to certain values, and I have an integer z, which is the result of integer division of x and y. Now, as you can as you can see, that 0 is in the denominator, which is y is in the denominator, so it's a divide by 0. So this will cause an exception. So let's go. If I go further, it has assigned x to 7. If I go further, y to 0, and when I did that, you can see that I have an exception being thrown, which is by 0 exception. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that Java has encountered an error which it cannot go further than that. So exception is an exception to the processing of the normal code, and the program stops here. So these are a little bit different. This could be easily handled by if and else statement. But there are sometimes, there are some things that cannot be handled just by if and else. So for that, we learned the exception handling. So for the code of exceptional handling, let me explain to you, see. So I want to catch this, and I say, okay, if that happens, then I will say, I will put it in a try block. What is a try block? A try block is a block as a block of code in which we assume that something can happen, but here we put the code inside the try and catch. Inside the catch, what does that happen? What happens is, when you have an exception, basically an object containing the information about the exception and why that error happened and what happened when the error was there, what line of code has caused that error. So that will be the exception information that will be stored in an object, and that object will be received in a type of exception. So I'm using the most general type of exception, E, that is the parent class of all of the exceptions. So any type of exception would be called, and inside the catch block, you will put what you want to do with that exception. So let's say what I want to do is I want to print the information, like I just want to say system.out.println, so that the user knows what has happened. System.out.println, your number was not right, or you entered a wrong number, or your number was wrong, or something like that. So it's not a good message, but again, we can put something like that in here. So if I visualize exception, my code will die, but it will die gracefully. So let's see, I come in here and I say okay, and it has happened. So my program didn't die. Instead, I have a you can see I have a message. If I go further, and it will say your number was wrong, and program did not die just of any issue. Another example that I can show you here, many of us have used the let me just take out everything from here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an array of numbers. Let's say it is an integer array of 7, or just put it in there 5 numbers in there. So it's an integer array of size 5, and I'm going to run a for loop, and integer I would be my index into array is equal to 0, I less then as less than or equal to, let me put it there in here. So I want to kind of like forgot that I should go one less than, but I go less than equal to 5 I plus plus. Now we all know that there is no, we all know that there is no index number 5 in here. I have 5 elements. They are index 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 elements starting from 0. There is no element number 5, right? So let's go ahead and print out every number. So all of my numbers are 0 right now, because by default Java will assign them a number of value of 0, and we will say I want to print I is equal to, and then I will say print the value of I plus equal to, or I plus, and I will print after that the index value at that particular index. So I print the index value, and I'm going to print the index value of the element at that time. So let's say what will happen in that case. So let's move forward. And I went in there. It's like you can see this is my index array, and it is ID of 428. It's an array. It's just an object. Array is always an object because it refers to multiple objects. So when we come in here, it comes, you can look at here, okay, I is equal to 0 and is pointing to 0. Let's go further. It's going happily, and all of the values are 0. And let's say now see when it goes to, now what is I is equal to 5, right? And now it's trying to print, but that has happened index array out of bound. So that is also an exception. The exceptions in which we kind of can proceed and can happen at runtime, and we do not have to put them inside the try and catch block, are called the unchecked exceptions. So Java compiler does not fuss, and it lets you proceed with those kind of errors, and it assumes that these are the things that program will catch at the runtime. So these are the unchecked exceptions. But there are some pieces of code where the compiler would not let you go, or would not let you move forward, or would not even compile the code unless you put them inside the exception and try catch block. Now let me show you another example. So here I want to write a simple program in which I give a in this little file I'm writing a simple method, read file, and I give a file name, and it is fussing. So what I would do is I will fix the imports, and that fix the java .io.file. I'm using NetBeans in here. So let me read this file, right? I want to read this file, and let's see can I read from this file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a scanner, let's say call it a reader, and to this scanner I'm going to say it's a new scanner, and I want to read the file object that I have created. Here, using the file name, the string that I have referred to it as a file, and now this scanner is fussing. First of all, I have to fix the imports. So when I fix the imports, so what is the issue now? It is not fussing here, but it's fussing in here. It's saying unreported exception. So this type of exception is a checked exception. As you guys see, when I was trying to divide by 0, no one stopped me. When I was trying to run a loop out of index, no one stopped me in compiling the program, although my program did not work and it stopped. It ended up in an exception, but there was no safeguard beforehand. But here you can see it's fussing on me. So if I go in here, I would have to enclose this particular statement inside a try catch block. So Java provide you checked and unchecked exceptions, and in the try catch block what I see is I will say try this statement and then catch if something happened, and please give me a handle on that. I will get it in E, and what I would do is I will play around with it, or I will print out some kind of error. Most of the time what we do is we take this object that has been referred to us, because whenever error happen here we will be given an object, and this object will contain information, and we will say e dot we would like to print the issue that has happened. So I will put the e dot print stack trace. Okay, so I have to just see whether I have not completed the file. So here, so what is this is what the try catch block is used to contain the exceptions. Now in here there are multiple things that I can do in my try catch block, and I will say while reader dot has next line. So let's say has next line. Even as long as I have the next line, what I do want to do is system.out.println. I will tab it out, and I will say reader dot get dot read. I will get the next line from there. I will read the next line. I will read the next line, and I can print it out on the screen. So all of these operations require us to have a connection to the file. Now when we are dealing with that, we are not totally staying inside the system of Java compiler. We are actually accessing the operating system, because our operating system expect us to do we expect the operating system to read the file and give it to us, and the operating system has to be involved. So there are things that are beyond what Java compiler will do, and in that case if some error happens, then Java compiler want to make sure that before you access those kind of resources, you put them in a try catch block. So let's try this thing, and I want to show you a little bit of this example here, how that works when we perform these kind of operations. So I just wrote a simple class that make use of my file2. I just use the name file2 for my. So I have this file2 class, which I just named file2 just to say that it's a file reader, so you'll remember what it was. And then I did write a test class, and in this test class I am going to call this class, and I'm going to I'm going to call this and see to execute how that executes, right? So let's go ahead and run this, and I will just say run file, and it would be running, and see what happens. So let's run and see what happens. So we kind of going to run this file, and here you can see this is my file that has been read here, and it will be printed out. So remember, this is how our file look like. I will show you. This is my file. This is how it looks like, and this is what's printed on the screen. Now let me show you an error when that can happen. So let's go back to our file2 class in here, and let's say I give it a well, also let's go first to the my test class, and here I give it a name of a file that does not exist. Let's say test1.txt. That doesn't exist, right? As the file does not exist, so let's see what happens when we run with that. So these are just the log and IDE. So let me run this now. What will happen? And if I run this file, you will see it says file not found exception. So this is coming from where do you put the e dot print stack trace. So it is printing the stack trace, and using this you can figure out which line did you have. This is your which in the one at these are the Java libraries one, so try to look for where you can recognize it. And the bottommost one in here, we have the file2.java at line number 13 is doing something that is causing that issue. Okay, one thing that we can also do is there is another block which we call the finally block. So we have a try block. If you look at the whole thing, we start with our file. We have a try block. In the try block we put the stuff that can cause issues. So this is a whole try block. So if I just After that we have a catch block. Now try block happens. When try block happen, we have try block run the statements, and if there is an error, then an object of type exception is thrown out, which is received in this catch block, and we can do whatever we want to do. Now if the exception doesn't happen, then this block will not happen. Okay, nothing will happen. Now we can also add another block called finally. What is the job of the finally block? It runs all the time whether the exception happen or not. So finally block is good in case that you have if you haven't done any mistake but you still want to do some kind of processing. So finally block is a good idea. For example, you open a file or you open a network connection, it may or may not work correctly, but whether it worked correctly or whether it did not work correctly, you want to stop. You want to close that connection and make sure all the resources. So in this case, we just say system.out.println. And in this example, we can just print out that finally always happen. So whether there is going to be an error or not, finally block will always happen, because it is a block that is usually you use that if you have opened a connection to the database, you want to close it, whether the database result access resulted in error or not. You want to close it, whatever is your whatever has happened to your database connection, just like in here. So if I go back and try the test again, so here I am going to run it with a file that does not exist, so that means my catch block will happen. So let's go and see what happened when I run that, and let me run the file. And you see that it says finally always happen, and then it prints out all the stack trace of the issue. Now let's go back and run it with something with the file that we do have, which should be the correct file. So let's see what happened in that case. Let's run the file and see. It does print out the stuff, but it also print out finally always happen. Now in the next class, or in the next discussion, what I will discuss is I will discuss how we can do different type of exceptions, and how we can make our own exception classes, and how can we make a method throw an exception outside of itself, okay, and does not put the try catch block in itself. So here the try catch block is being handled by this own method, but what we could have done is we could have taken out this particular responsibility from this method. So if you guys see that I have taken out the finally, and I have taken out everything from here, and of course this is just a redundant block, close it. And so what we have in our file is we have a simple file, and it is saying unreported exception. So what we can do is we can say this is our method, and rather than so we don't want to take responsibility, and I say sorry, we will write it down, throws. And of course if I want to be specific, I will say file not found exception, but here I can say that this is a the method throws exception, not the class, sorry. Yeah, let me move up in here. So what it is saying is that this particular method throws exception. I have to move that, sorry, my fat fingers are not working right. So it does say that this is a whole method and it throws exception. When we do that, then the responsibility of handling the exception is then delegated to the code that is using it. So if I go back in here, there is going to be an error in here. If I call this, and it will first that there is an unreported exception, because the method says I throw an exception. So what I can do is I can put here the try and catch here. So I can say that here, and then I put my catch, and I say, well, whatever is thrown to me, I will catch in exception. I'm going to call it exception E, and I'm going to print the stack the trace in here. So I will just use this method. I will print that method, and that's I'm going to do, and I can have a final if I want to here as well. So what we just learned is that the files they have to deal with the exception. For example, if I take out this particular statement, you see that now I have an issue. So either you have to deal with the checked exceptions, or you have to take care of them where you call them. So this is what we call the checked and unchecked exceptions. So there are simple exceptions where we have, there are simple unreported unchecked exceptions. I'll divide by zero, number format exceptions and stuff like that, where the compiler can take care of it. Compiler does not have to access some resource outside of the Java virtual machine. It can just run its own. But if it has to access a resource from the network or from the operating system, just like we have to get it from there, it will fuss on you. So either you declare your try catch block right there, or you I'm just going to make a little prettier, or you have to make sure that you delegate that by doing this. And when you do that, then any class that is going to use that, they have to take the responsibility of try and catch, because as soon as they access this method is going to need the exception handling, because it declares that. So I hope you understand a little bit about the exceptional handling. In my next video, I will discuss how to deal with the multiple exceptions and how we can make our own exception class, and can a code throw more than one type of exception, and can exceptions travel from one code to another. Let's talk about that in our next statement.